I had never met before in my life. I'd just been given his telephone number by a friend of his. He said, "Oh, you must."
Alright, so I figured I should probably follow up on Kingdom Come Deliverance and elaborate a little more, because a few people seem to have taken
well, it did take
the
me
video
quite a lot of time to make
yesterday
this
the
video.
wrong way, and there were in fact even some very, very angry responses. There were just a couple, the majority was either...
Does this really actually matter? Welcome to the first video in a new sort of series that I'm trying, where I take a question or statement or a topic that I find throughout my comment section and we'll talk about them for as long as it basically takes my dinner to finish cooking. Let's define historical accuracy. Now there's of course a lot of YouTubers, such as Lindy Beige, Scalagrim, the Metatron, that go about analysing video games. I love most of their videos. I'd say that Lindy Beige is probably my favourite since he goes into a lot more detail about different subjects and is more wide about his variety of things that he makes videos on. But this is not a promotional video for him. No, shut up, Jacob, shut up. But no matter how much I think these guys do a great job on their channels, I feel like there are some issues when it comes to analysing video games and TV series on the historical accuracy. Yes, while it's important to have historical accuracy if that is the intention of the artistic piece, it's also possible to go a bit too far into analysing it when at the end of the day it's a bit of entertainment that just needs to be enjoyed. But that brings me on to the intention of the piece of media. If it's intended to be a historically accurate educational piece of work, if it's basing it on the true story, then of course it needs to get as many of the facts correct. But if it's just there as an entertainment value, if it's just there to tribute to a myth or a legend, or even just a setting, I feel like historical accuracy doesn't matter in this context. Now I know this is mostly about games, but I feel like this encases film as well. For example, the History Buff's video of Braveheart was of course analysing, as he usually does, the historical accuracy of course, the setting and period of the film. While most of this video I incredibly enjoyed, like all the rest of the videos he does on his channel, there was one part that kind of confused me a little bit. It was talking about an interview with the director where he was saying he wanted to capture the myth of William Wallace. Of course, because there's so much myth and legend around this character, it is a patriotic symbol for Scotland. And history buffs went in on the director for that, saying why would you try and capture a myth? Why would you not want it to be as historically accurate as possible? That is shunning this historical character and doing this no justice. All in all, encapsulating it as a terrible film. Now by no means do I think this is a good film, but I think that point is important, that the director never wanted it to be historically accurate. If you're going into that film thinking it's going to be historically accurate, then you're going into it in the wrong attitude. The director wanted to encapsulate the myth, the legend of this amazing character, and that's what he did. But I feel like that's not really an issue. But let's define historical accuracy before we go on. People sometimes complain in the comments that I've seen a lot when I put, oh, this is a great historical game, or like my top 10 historical games you should get in the Steam summer sale. People saying, this isn't historical, oh yeah, The Witcher, historical, yeah, you're funny. And yes, it's always going to happen, but I think it's down to people really don't know the difference between calling something historical and historically accurate. And I used my amazing Sherlock skills here and I typed it in on Google for some definition. So by definition, historical in conjunction with media means either a film or novel, which also of course includes games, that is set in the past. Of course, a direct quote is based on history. For me, that's exactly what encapsulates historical. That is completely different to historical accuracy, because historical accuracy means, well, how accurate is it to the history? Where historical means it's either based in the past, based on around characters, or just based in a time setting, taking bits, but not necessarily being accurate to the time setting. So even calling something like 300 historical, in its most literal sense, is not wrong. It's based on history, it's based on real events, real characters. Yes, name changes have been made, of course artistic license. Is it at all historically accurate? God no, of course it's not. But it's still technically historical for its being based in history. Or about The Witcher 3, does it have mythical creatures? Of course it does. Does it completely make up characters, events and storylines? Of course it does, it's a game. But does it have some bases and ideas from the past? 100% it does. Okay, now that's out of the way, we can get on to the main chunk of the video. Like anything, artistic license and historical accuracy have their place in different situations. For example, 300 is based on a comic, and it doesn't claim to be historical accurate, and I love that film. I mean, I may have seen it one too many times, so I feel like it's got a bit boring to me now, but that film is absolutely awesome. It doesn't claim to be historically accurate, it doesn't claim to be educational, it's based on a comic. So we're going to be looking today at 3 very different games that take historical accuracy and artistic license in 3 very different positions and takes. At the more realism side, we're taking Kingdom Come Deliverance for an example. While of course it's a game, it's never going to be totally accurate to its time period, but in terms of mainstream gaming we have today in the genre, it's about as close as we're going to get to an accurate look into medieval Bohemia. A lot of real characters and events that have happened, and the history of course behind them. Now covering the middle ground is Mount & Blade Warband, a game set in the made-up land of Caradia, completely fictional, with made-up factions, lords and land, but it's very much based around medieval Europe, with troops, architecture and land based in history, and of course each faction is modelled after real-life peoples of our past. And finally, For Honor, throwing historical accuracy straight out the window in an attempt to make a fun arcade game featuring samurai, Vikings and knights fighting to the death. Fun. No, naughty Resonant. This is not time for your opinion. I mean, I could continue the video here and you wouldn't know any the wiser, but actually, this is the next day to when I first started recording the first part of this video. And I just wanted to interrupt here, just say, screw you, Sweden. So let's first talk about Kingdom Come Deliverance. Now, Kingdom Come Deliverance has tried to be as accurate and fitting to the time period as it actually can. It has real-life weapons, real-life armors, real-life places, and it's all based around it. I did a map comparison of the map in Kingdom Come and where it is in real life. If you want to go and check that video, I'd definitely recommend it on my channel earlier. But of course, Warhorse Studios had to take some creative liberties, such as creating the character of Henry, and of course the whole storyline around that. The whole bandit camps and doing all that stuff, yeah, that's all completely made up, or at least as far as I know. But there are some people in there that actually did come across these lands and these events happened, such as Sigismund really did invade. There really was this whole battle between Wenceslas and Sigismund, and get everything going wrong in the general perspective of the game. Yes, the stories of the individual characters are completely made up, they're fictional, but it is all based around this real life events and happenings. But even though the individual and personal stories of these characters are made up, they're still pretty realistic to what it could have been like at the time. Of course, it needs to be a bit cooler as a character, going from nothing to going up throughout the ranks and becoming somewhat up with the high-class nobility at the end of the game as Henry is. It would have been a bit boring if you were just some random typical dude that nothing really happened, but they still have tried to make it out that Henry is just this random dude that he just got in the right place, or shall I say the wrong place at the wrong time, and he had the drive to get to this position. But there's nothing there that is unrealistic to the time period and what could have happened. So I think Warhorse Studios did a great job of making this historically accurate, and they made a brilliant game. I think the biggest disappointments that people have had with this game is things like bugs, but that's going to happen with most open world games, and yeah, while there are more bugs than some, I feel like that's nothing to do with the historical accuracy. It is not ruining. Yes, there was a whole article about how Kingdom Come Deliverance could be racist or sexist, but it was trying to stay as historically accurate to the time period as possible. But that is a conversation for another day. So I think Kingdom Come Deliverance is a great example of a game developer taking historical accuracy, mixing with the creative liberties of storytelling, and making an absolutely brilliant game. But let's move on to Mount & Blade. Now, Mount & Blade, like I said, is more of a middleman in this situation. While it is based in historical context, it has a lot of pieces taken from history, and especially medieval Europe. It is a fantasy world, and it is based on fantasy characters and factions. But even so, these factions are still based on real-life people. Like, Aswadians, I think, are rather based around the French. Of course, the Nords are based around the Scandinavians and the Nordic places. So even some of the individual troop types were based off the real life. Of course, we've got the Sauron Age, which is down in the south, which I think can be related more to the Assyrians and that sort of nature, or at least a sort of Middle East, Turkey, sort of going on a bit further to the east there. But while Mount & Blade takes the strategy and RPG genres and mashes them together, it doesn't have to be historically accurate at all. Kingdom Come Deliverance is this storyline, it's this single player story simulation and immersion into the world. It's a lot more important for this to be on more of the historical accurate for what the kind of game they're going for. Mount & Blade doesn't have to be, but they decided to take the conscious decision to take things from history and put it in to give it a more grounded feel. If you're having complete fantasy in a game like this, it's not going to feel like a medieval arcadey game, which Mount & Blade is. It's going to feel more like a made up, more fantasy game, which a lot of the mods, granted, do bring into the game, but you have that nice mixture, while you have the abilities to do pretty much whatever you want, playing as this high lord nobility or going down and playing as more of a bandit type, but you still have it grounded in history, so you don't feel like you're doing anything far out from reality of the time period. And finally, we have For Honor. Now, yes, I did make a little joke about how I didn't really like the game that much. Granted, I haven't played a ton of it. It's not really my type of game, but it has been very successful. And I think this was a good step for Ubisoft. It was a step in a good direction, I think. They decided they wanted to dabble a bit in the historical context. Yes, Assassin's Creed has done it before, but they wanted to take it into a different gameplay, a different IP, and I hope that maybe if there's a sequel or some games following on from For Honor, they can take it even further, take those risks. Because yes, while it is introducing Vikings, medieval knights and samurai, they're still playing it very safe, or as I like to call it, they're playing it very Ubisoft. If you go into that game, you know it's a Ubisoft game. While it has some features that they've never really put in a game before, it's still very Ubisoft feeling. It has this arcadey multiplayer type feel. And it's safe to say that there is basically no historical accuracy in For Honor. Yes, while it's some bits to take from history like medieval knights armor, samurai weapons, and of course Viking weapons, it's completely stylized. Everything has to be taken from a grain of salt for history, and I've seen a lot of people and historical YouTubers that do this sort of thing for their channel shun the game for this. And I think this is what my main point of this video is. Context matters. Warhorse Studios wanted to make a realistic RPG set in medieval Bohemia. They did that, but this meant they have to focus more on realism and historical accuracy to get their point across, and this gave it a much more grounded feel to the game, and is what made it so successful compared to if they just loosely based on reality. Mount and Blade did the same thing. They wanted to keep the game grounded in history while having an arcadey feel to it to improve the gameplay, and I think it's safe to say the gameplay in Mount and Blade is some of the best gameplay in any hand-to-hand combat type game. And For Honor didn't care about history. They wanted a fun arcadey game that was more on the mainstream line. I think it's safe to say that the kind of stuff that I do that make videos on Mount and Blade, Kingdom Come Deliverance, Total War, aren't exactly mainstream. Well, for the exception of Total War these days, it's getting more into the mainstream line. Ubisoft wanted to bring this sort of genre that we've got going on here, bring it into the mainstream, and I think they did that pretty well. They kept the arcadey style feel game that, you know, console players love, but they brought in a setting that a lot of us guys in this community love to play, spreading it to the masses, and I think that's a great thing. Whether I enjoy the game for its gameplay or not, it is a good game because many people enjoy it. It's a very well made game, and it's really spread out our community and our genre, and trying to mix it and blur the lines between the mainstream gaming and of course historical gaming. And that was their intention. They never intended to make a historical game. They intended to make a fun game based in a historical setting. And that is what is important to me. So does historical accuracy matter? Such a big argument in this community that I've seen so many times. May it be from other YouTubers or just the comments section. My answer to this is context. If you're making a historical documentary, of course, Jesus Christ, of course it matters you do your research. If you're making a game that you want to be based in history to teach people about the world and create more of a simulation like Warhorse Studios did, they have done all this research to put into it, or like Bannerlord are doing with all the architecture that they're doing research in to put into their game to show people what it could really be like at this time. That does matter, because that's their intention. Then I see people shunning games like For Honor or Assassin's Creed for not having the same realism, for being so arcadey, for having wrong looking armor. I saw so many comments on the announcement of Assassin's Creed Odyssey saying, this game is stupid, none of this ever happened, that's the wrong armor, or things like Leonidas never had a daughter. That may well be, but it doesn't matter. They are not going for a historical accurate game, they're just going for a fun game. You don't complain that GTA isn't realistic to how the world actually works. You don't have millions of people going around hijacking planes all the time every second of the day. But no one complains because it's fun. They made it for fun. But it's set in the modern day, which I think gives it an automatic pass. But as soon as a game developer takes something back into history, everyone assumes they have to make it historically accurate. And if that's not their intentions, I don't think it's really relevant at all. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. What is your thoughts on the matter? I really like these discussion videos because it gives me a time just to chat and talk. And if you guys really want to support the channel, definitely click the link in the description to go to my Patreon, because I'm going to start a Patreon podcast where I just chill and talk about this sort of thing. I'm doing certain live streams with this as well. I really like these videos. If you guys want any more topics for sort of controversial or some just interesting things you want me to talk about on the channel, make sure you leave it down in the comments below. But until then, guys, I will see you in the next one.